hopefully I got his venture ability. But he has a really extraordinary story, and I'm really excited for him to be able to speak to you. This is the first time he's spoken to Goose. He's spoken at Draper University a couple times, so this is fantastic. Good.
Well, it's really great to be here, and you are all entrepreneurs, and I love entrepreneurs. It's a yin and yang kind of a relationship between the venture capitalist and the entrepreneur. I wrote a book called The Startup Game, and the subtitle was Inside the Relationship Between the Venture Capitalist and the Entrepreneur. And you all have to read it. That's your first, I mean, you can't graduate without that. I am going to start off with sort of a question of you. What is you're all entrepreneurs, you're all starting up companies. What are some of the things you have got to do right away? Many of you have already done them, some of these things, but what is it that you got to do right away?
Get revenue.
Revenue right away. That's great if you can do it, and I agree.
Let's say validate assumptions.
Validate assumptions, and you kind of analyze where you're going. You got a vision, you're going to go look into a territory, and then you got to check on what the competition is, what's out there. Is there somebody already doing it? Yep. Get your product out there, or service if you're in that. And so those are all very good. Keep going. Yeah. That's right. Now, who do you go to? That's the other good thing. Truthfully, I have backed away. I refer everything to Tim or Adam. By the way, I'm pretty proud of him. He's a terrific grandchild who's just become a father himself, so life is continuing in the Draper family. Where is Quinn? She should be in the front seat. Yeah, we've got 3 generations of venture capitalists, and he's the 4th, and she's the 5th. What else do you worry about? Do you start up? What do you got to do? Good. You can't do this by yourself. So you've got to be a personality that includes others, and you find that your life is a lot easier if you select really fine people, and they will take the workload off, because it's lonely at the top. It's the venture capital. I mean, the entrepreneur is probably as lonely a job as you can have, because you can't really talk to anybody who understands what you're doing, because you're unique. Your situation is unique, and it's the highest. Entrepreneurs have the highest divorce rate in the country as a profession. It's because it's a 14-hour-day job, and you got to put that into it. You got to have that kind of commitment. I mean, I think you should try to hold on to your wife or your husband, but and balance that. But there is a real strain, and it's very difficult. So you have to have the commitment to really want to go forward and live through all the pain and hardship and the bad luck and the cancellation of the order and whatever. What else do you need? Nobody mentioned a lawyer. You gotta have a lawyer. You want to get a good lawyer, not a cheap lawyer. I mean, it'd be good if it was good and cheap, but you need a lawyer to put the corporate stuff together so that you're not all there, you're out there and all of a sudden you didn't do something you had to do and you're in jail or something. I mean, in other words, let's definitely get a lawyer. Doesn't need to be a big time, we doesn't need to be a big time guy, but don't just get your good friend who barely got through high school and finally got a law degree in Europe somewhere, and get a good lawyer to get you set up the right way to start with. What else do you need? You need money, you need a lawyer, you need to get it organized, you need people. What else do you need? Okay, so let's get into that. As you're building your team, let's suppose you're a hell of an engineer. Hell of an engineer. There's a song about Georgia Tech. And you're really good at engineering, and you think everybody's going to come and buy your product because it's so good. But they don't, and you've got to go to them. They aren't probably going to come to you. So you have to get a really good matching your quality as an engineer in sales and marketing. So very often, a big mistake that I've found, and a lot of times we'll back the engineering team, and a lot of times the mistake they make is thinking that we got to double the engineering budget. We got to, and what's the next thing to do? Well, we got to quadruple the engineering budget. And they just keep plowing it back into what they know, but they're not really giving full weight to the problem of selling it. And nothing happens until a sale is made in any enterprise. And so the trick is to have a balanced team so that you got plenty of strength behind the marketing and the sales team. And they're different, by the way, marketing and sales. And take different qualities. People are different, and it's different kind of, but very often the first hire you'll have in a small operation will try to do both, and that's okay. But eventually you've got to split those two functions apart. And then, so you got sales, and you got marketing, and you've got the product engineered. Anybody else you need on the team? You have to know how what was that? I can't hear. Yeah, now you do need that. You do need somebody exactly like that. How about, and that might be you. I mean, you might be that person that really pulls all this together, because if you're a CEO that has the breadth of organization and management, you'll often pull all that together. But I think you are alluding to what I was wondering if anybody would speak up and say, you need a CFO, a chief financial officer, or you need a controller anyway. You don't need to be a full-time person. You could have somebody that comes in once a week, but make sure that the financial strategy is right, that the bookkeeping is accurate, and that your money is being spent where you want it to be spent, and keeps track of that. And a good CFO will also guide you on the terms of your sale, so that you'll sell, and just say, hey, it's wonderful you want my product, and yeah, it's $1,500, and well, great, you took it, and then the $1,500 doesn't come in and of course, any other good CFO buying the product, and usually these big companies have CFOs who live by the rule of stretch the money, don't let it get out of here unless it's absolutely necessary. So you need to put terms on your sale, such as 30 days, net, and then charge interest as if they extend it. And each of those, you can have different programs depending on who your customer base is and what is required. But you want to get that money back in the house as fast as possible. And a handshake isn't quite good enough, so a good CFO will make sure you've got a contract and you get a signature on the sale and so on. Anything else that you think about when you're all entrepreneurs? Yeah. That's, well, at least somehow you got to match the two up, and eventually you got to put the product in the hands of the customer. So finding that customer is not all that easy. One of the problems that we found is an entrepreneur would come to us as a venture capital firm and say, oh, this is a snap. There are 7 billion people in the world, and all we need to do is get 1% of those, and this will be the biggest company on the earth. And that's all we need. And isn't this great and easy? And so it's so easy to blur out. So you raise a good question. You've got to get a customer that is accessible, that's going to like what you're doing. And I must say the social networks have reached more customers than ever when I first started in venture capital, which I'll tell you about a little later, was, you had to sort of meet the customer, get to the customer in person, fly to Chicago to make the pitch and all this. But I got to say, the social network, if you're in that kind of business, the internet has made it so easy to fly, to save you from flying all over the world and touching so many customers that you didn't even know existed. I'm on the investor in and go to the board meetings of an organization company called Flurry, and Flurry has a database that's huge, and we've just announced that we're selling the company to Yahoo. We know more about who is using Apple than Apple does by who, the sex, the age, the length of time on the product, the geography, and so we are very helpful to ad agencies to know how to hit and who they're reaching. It's a customer. I'm glad you mentioned it, because a customer is so different one from another, and yet you're bringing them together on your product, your service, and you've got to pay a lot of attention to who that customer is. And they often say that the best entrepreneurs are the ones that stay the closest to their customer. They really know who they're working for, and so that is an essential. Anything else? Any other thing that comes to mind? So you've got your financial management, your marketing and sales. You've got yourself, who's a brilliant engineer, and you've got that part of the team. Who else comes to mind that you need? an advisor. By the way, advisors are really important in a young startup, but you're basically going to have to make the decision because you'll get different kinds of advice. If you have 3 advisors, they'll all have different ideas, and so you need to synthesize that, figure it out, and getting good advisors is very important. Not in the management team, though. Probably just they meet with you once a month or once a quarter. Now, anybody want to talk about the board, though? Because advisor gets pretty close to that. So don't get on your board your neighbor and your neighbor's wife, and they'll let you do anything you want, and that's why you want them on the board. And therefore, the 3 of you, that's all you need. You do need 3 on a board. A Delaware corporation, for instance, and that's the least onerous state on, it's very easy to get a Delaware corporation put together, but so you'll either have a California corporation or a Delaware one, probably. But your board should not be just close friends who say whatever you want, Sam, that's okay. You want to get variety in the board. You'd like to get a good venture capitalist. So when you talked about, getting the money and getting the venture cap, money is only part of what a good venture capitalist delivers. And so you want to get a venture capitalist that will sit on your board, take a real interest, get you to the next level of financing by introduction, get you to the right customer if he's got contacts or she's got contacts that you could use, and he or she uses those contacts so that he doesn't just say, well, good luck, and I'll see you at the next board meeting. You want somebody who's really going to work for you. And the chairman of the board probably should not be you. It should be somebody else who bears some of the burden of managing the board itself and giving you connections, living with you, somebody that you can talk to over lunch about a tough situation. By the way, a lot of entrepreneurs make a mistake of protecting the board from bad news. If you don't remember anything else that I said, think about your team and your board. Get the bad news out fast. Make sure they understand what you're thinking, what you're seeing, and where you're trying to go. I had a wonderful company investment in a company that was over in the East Bay, and they had about 6 rooms in their plant, call them a plant or their office space, and this CEO was damn good because he made sure that everybody was on the same page, and literally page, because he would put pages taped up on the wall, lots of them. What our projection is, favorable, unfavorable, our customers that are the most important in up there, where our cash balances are. He was not one of these guys who thinks he's got to have everything kept to himself and nobody should know how weak his company is and that sort of thing. A little description of, let's say he's making a pitch to a given customer. He'd have a a whole sheet about that customer and who's coming in and what they do, and if anybody can help or has any ideas about it, let him know. He just wanted everybody in the, and he had maybe, I'm talking maybe he had 35 people in the, and right from the beginning though, from when he had 3, he wanted everybody to know what he was thinking and the strategy he had, because it just helped him carry that out successfully. So that's just another piece of advice. Don't hold back on the bad news, and be sure everybody on your team knows that they're important in your success, and they know what you're trying to do and where you're trying to grow and where you expect to be next year and the year after that and the year after that. My partner and I, Robin Richards and I, started a venture capital company in India about 1994. And we were the first ones to go to India as a cross-border venture capital. Now there are probably 25 or 30 U.S. venture firms in India. We were first, so our timing was good. Because being first is another thing. If you're a Me Too company, you ought to change something so that you're not, because you don't want to just try to go up and compete with IBM head on. You've got to have something that's a little different, that clearly you have an edge. And being first is really good. We were first in India, so all the best deals came to us, and the Indian population here, often they were American citizens with Indian heritage, but they were very helpful to us in the beginning. They had just set up in 1994 something called the Indus Entrepreneurs, TIE, they call it TIE. Some of you have heard of it. God, they were so helpful to us. And we would get connections into India, and we'd get the very cream of the cream, As a result, in 6 years, we had returned 16 times the limited partners' money in 6 years. That's a very high return. And that allowed us to we decided to give some of this back, and we started a foundation that is venture capital for nonprofits. If any of you are thinking of going into a nonprofit program, let us know. We give $300,000 of startup capital over a 3-year period. We stick with you 3 years only, and then we get off your board and get out of your hair. But we have already launched you. We've done about 60 of these. We're going to do 100 in the next 3 years. And we're, it's all nonprofit. Now, interesting, it's mostly men here in the room. And we have about half women and half men running these various organizations. And we have found that the men and women are exactly the same in that the ones we want to back and the ones we do back, and we've had a very good record, back 60 and only lost about 4 that haven't really succeeded. They have all, the ones we've selected, the women and the men have pretty much the same commitment, the same brain power, the same talent of bringing people together, leadership. And so as a result, I encourage you to look, you men, to look for terrific women who they'll fill the bill of one of those management slots in your company. I frankly think it balances your team. It makes you more productive. And the results are clear. I mean, there are some just fantastic women that have made it big. Marissa Mayer, you know, she was 8.5 months pregnant when she took over Yahoo, and she's shook up Yahoo like nobody else had done. And she said, hey, wait a minute, I'm in the office, nobody's here. You know, they were all working at home. And she said, from now on, we're all going to work here. You're going to commute. You're not. I mean, so it isn't like many men think that women can't be tough and focus on the right. So I encourage you to think in a broader sense. Anyway, I'm just very stuck on that. I've helped when I was at the UN. I worked running the largest aid program in the world, the United Nations Development Program. I did that for 7 years, and I found at that time how effective women are in every walk of life. So don't just think of a team of men. Be sure you really examine the whole territory. Well, let's cut it there and ask you what's on your mind and what I can, yes.
Hi, Mr. Draper. It's a privilege to have you here. We're very honored.
Well,
I'm Catherine Nicholson. I'm CEO of BlockCypher. We are the Amazon Web Services. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear me better now?
Why don't you? Yeah.
Okay. I'm Catherine Nicholson. I'm CEO of BlockCypher. We are the Amazon Web Services for Bitcoin. I wanted to see if you could comment on timing. You had mentioned that it's great to be first. Mark Andreessen just put out this tweet storm about timing is actually the most critical part for a startup. And it's actually not best to be first. It's better to be sort of last, because then you understand all the mistakes that were made from being first. And I was wondering if you could comment on that.
Okay. See, it's really a good question, because Andreessen has been very successful in coming in after he has seen how a company operates and where it is on the scale and where it's going, and he's been very good at figuring out which ones are in the territory that still have lots of growth ahead. I am in the more early stage. I like the fun of the early stage. And I think the impact that I have at that early stage is much more than I would have if I came in at the stage. I'm not going to say more than he has, because he's a brilliant guy and he's a fantastic, but I would not do as well at his level in investing at that. I wouldn't have that much to add. The company's already a big success often when he's an investor. So it's quite a different, and I'm glad there are both sides of it. But you guys are all in the early stage. Well, it's much more fun for me to be associated with you than some big company. I worked for Inland Steel for 4 or 5 years in Chicago, and I've been there, done that. I don't want to work, in just something that isn't fun. By the way, if you're not having fun, get out. Because that's the most important thing. And people who respond, I've talked to a lot of the people that have gone to Boost before, and almost all of them say it was a lot of fun. And if it isn't fun for you now, I don't know what's going to be, but get out. But I think fun is really important in your job, and I've got a crazy son, his father, and the crazy son. I was with him this a week ago in a summer place that we go to off Long Island, and he island there, and they have something called a lobster party every year, and it's a big thing, and the whole community comes. Point of Woods it's called, and so most people are just, they got lobster, they've got things on to keep, some kind of a napkin, and they've got drooling butter off the corn on the cob, and they're cracking these lobsters, and we all have a lot of fun, and the whole community is really into this. Once a year, they look forward to it. In fact, I had to extend we rented a house there, and it's the most expensive lobster I've ever had, because they said, well, I was up on a Friday, my lease for the house was up, and I said, I'd just like to stay these last 3 days so that I get into the lobster thing. Well, that's all right, then. Cost you $3,000. So that lobster, was really expensive. But anyway, crazy son doesn't just enjoy himself along with everybody else. He has to put on a lobster uniform. The whole thing. He was lobster from toe to top, and then he goes around and shakes hands with everybody who would do it. Anyway, he's a crazy guy. So I've forgotten where I started with that one, but anyway. Having fun. Thank you. God, I like this guy. He pays attention. He's sitting here in a white, he stands out, and I don't know where you're going, but you're going to have a big career. So let's say one of you might have asked the question, so I'm going to ask the question. How did I get here? Well, I was lucky enough to be born to a great father, just like my son, just like you. And so he was running the Marshall Plan out of Paris. And Averell Harriman told him, who was running it out of Washington, you ought to have Fred Anderson come and be your deputy. They both had ambassador rank, and it was a big deal, by the way. And so he did that, and Fred Anderson was, at that time, running the 8th Bomber Command. There's a movie about him called 12 O'Clock High, and it's all about the kids that were the pilots of these bombers that went over and bombed Berlin, and only about 2/3 of them came back. And he was a tough guy, the general, Fred Anderson. Anyway, he became my father's basically partner in running the Marshall Plan after the war, and they together cooked up the idea of coming to California and working on small companies, because venture capital was known in New York. There was Whitney, J.H. Whitney, a family, and Rockefellers, but they were both family companies. But Rockefeller, for instance, backed Minute Maid as a private thing, and Eastern Airlines as a private investment. So, and they called it venture capital. Out here, at the time I'm talking, 1959, there was absolutely no knowledge of the term venture capital was totally unknown. It was not Silicon Valley. It was Stanford Palo Alto, small community, nice academic environment, a lot of orchards, and in San Francisco there was the Bank of America and Wells Fargo and a couple of small investment banking companies. They decided to come here, and a guy named Terman, Fred Terman, it could be called Terman Valley instead of Silicon Valley, because Fred Terman had the idea of academia has come up with some great stuff here at Stanford. He was the provost at Stanford, and before that, the director of head of the engineering department at Stanford. But these various inventions aren't any good if they don't have some industrial support. So he mixed industry, business with academia, encouraged businessmen to come on the campus. They had 9,000 acres and were not allowed to sell 1 acre, but they figured a way to lease it for 99 years. So he encouraged Draper, Gaither, Rowan Gaither was the third, and Anderson on their new venture capital company to come onto the campus. So we rented on a 99-year lease at Stanford on Walsh Road, a little building, and we, because I was one of 5 young guys who joined the team, and we had a big 2-page article in Business Week about this new venture capital company. The Rockefellers put in a couple of million. Lazard Frere, another investment banking firm in New York, put in $2 million, and a couple of individuals put in $2 million. So we started with $6 million in Draper, Gaither, and Anderson. Now, Rowan Gaither was the managing partner of a law firm here, which is now called Cooley. It was then Cooley, Crowley, and Gaither. And Cooley is, I think, the best law firm in San Francisco. It's debatable, but I think that. And that Draper, Gaither, and Anderson would still be around, except Rowan Gaither died 2 years after we started it of cancer. Great guy. He had been president of the Ford Foundation and chairman of the board of the Rand Corporation and managing partner of Cooley and the founder of Draper, Gaither, and Anderson. And he died at the age of 50. So you got to get busy, you guys, because some of you are looking older, you know. So you got to get going. You know, I think of George Washington's time, and everybody died at 50, you know, and so they all did things when they were 25 and 30. So get going. It's fun. I mean, life is so good, and there's so much to it. Just be sure you have a lot of fun, you get going, but just back to the history, we had a lot of fun at Draper, Gaither, and Anderson, and we were the very first venture capital company outside of New York and Boston. There was an American Research and Development, which was started by a guy who taught at the Harvard Business School. Actually, I took his class, and he was a great guy, French-born, and was a general in the American Army, and he was Dorio. His name was Dorio, and he started American Research and Development, but he made a big mistake. A venture capital company gets their money some way or other. I just told you how Draper, Gaither, and Anderson got their money privately. It was a partnership. It was a general partnership, and they're all done that way now. But the way he did it, he went public. And it's a terrible business to have public because you can't predict what the earnings are. It's very blocky, and all of a sudden you got something 1 year, and the next year it's gone public and it's worth $2 billion, and in another case you got something you thought was worth $1 billion and it's worth nothing. it's very hard to predict and plan earnings, so it's a horrible thing for an outside investor to just watch who is unsophisticated or just, wants to know what the earnings are going to be next year so he knows what price earnings to pay. So those are some thoughts about the history. Worked out well here for all of us, and I don't think any of you will leave the Bay Area. Now, there's one that's going to New York because she's got a boyfriend that wants to go there. Well, he's in the room probably. I screwed up, didn't I? No, I'm sorry. I'm embarrassing somebody. So forget that. Erase that whole thing. But where you go is important. And if you go back to Keokuk, Iowa, and start up a company, unless it's in the farming business or something, I think you're probably not going to make it. But if you're looking for an engineering team and some support for your hot new company that's technologically oriented, you're in the right place. Don't leave the Bay Area. And the other piece of advice is, as soon as you can, buy some real estate. Because buy your own home, because that turns out to be one of my best investments. I mean, it is amazing. There's always more people coming here for the sunshine and because of Silicon Valley and Hollywood and just the excitement of California. And somehow real estate has just grown and grown and grown. And it never goes down. It just flattens out. You can't sell your place for a little longer time. And then it goes back up. So that's gratis. I mean, I'm not meant to be talking about how you put your money to work, but do buy your own home as soon as you can and make sure it's in California and not Keokuk, Iowa. I have nothing against Keokuk. I've never been to Keokuk, Iowa. I don't even know anybody from Keokuk, Iowa. But I do love the Bay Area, and it's really worked for me. Any other? Let's take two more questions.
How do you stop people from just telling you what you want to hear?
Pardon?
How do you stop people from telling you what you want to hear?
Me. How do I stop people from telling me?
Sure.
If they're telling me what I want to hear every day, I must have a hearing problem, because I get a lot of comments that are not what I want to hear. So I don't have that problem. But you're making a good point that, and when you become the boss of a good-sized company or any size company, the people that work for you, you don't want somebody that is just going to be schmoozing with the boss and trying to tell him everything he wants to hear. Steve Jobs, for example, a lot of people think that he was a guy who, if you disagreed with him, you were out, and he was tough, and he was tough. But the truth is, he did not like somebody who just agreed with him and said, yes, yes, yes. He in reading, and by the way, I recommend the book Jobs by Walter Isaacson to all of you. If you want to really know what variety the entrepreneurial territory covers, it's amazing, because this guy, you'd never think, if you knew him in certain relationships, you would never believe that he could have built the company that is the most valuable on the stock market today of any company in the world. And the book is terrific. And it looks fat, so you think, but it's a page turner. And it's called Jobs by Walter Isaacson. It's really good. But anyway, the point is, you don't want that kind of team, and if you've got somebody like that, I'm not sure you can ever really teach him or her. You probably ought to shove them, get rid of them. That's another thing. Entrepreneurs should always act quickly if they have the instinct that Sam, oh God, I don't know, Sam is okay, I guess, because I don't know, I really don't have the time to replace him, but right now I'll put it off. But Sam is not pulling his weight here, and I know it, but I just don't want to rock the boat right now. And they put off these decisions so often, and the weakest entrepreneurs just don't take action quickly. And that is another characteristic of a good entrepreneur, decisiveness, and then following it up with action. I'm glad you brought it up. One more question.
Two more questions.
I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about, so startups that are based in the USA, there's a lot of markets that are not here, right? And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about sort of a US team going into an emerging market or going into a new market, like the timing, maybe some mistakes that you've seen made, and just maybe talk a little bit about that, about going into, other markets, whether it's China, whether it's Brazil, or, if you could speak a little bit about that.
Okay, I know a little bit about that because we did go to India, as I told you, when we started our company, and it was just like your startups. I mean, we hired a couple of people, one from Bombay, one from Bangalore, that would be our eyes and ears. Robin and I, this wonderful woman that was my partner, still is my partner, she and I went over every couple of months, about every 6 weeks, and then we'd stay for about 2 weeks and vet the various deals that they were teeing up for us. And so one thing we did was not to go in and try to make decisions ourselves and have entrepreneurs come directly. We hired talented people in the location that we were going, in India. And so first, don't try and do it from here. Second, don't send, 3 guys from Norway and 2 guys from New York into China. Hire 3 Chinese, and then maybe send a couple of guys from your team to go work with them. So you've got the culture from here, but you've got the know-how, the street smarts in the town, in the area you're in. We thought about China when we first, she was had just graduated from Stanford Business School. The day after she graduated, we flew to China, and we looked at China as a possibility, India as another, Vietnam, Indonesia, and where would we concentrate, because we were only going to go to one country, but I wanted to be Asia because they were growing rapidly, and through the UN, I'd worked 7 years at the UN, I learned a lot about the world and who was growing and who wasn't. In the Asia, it was obvious. India. So we picked India because why would you pick India over China back then anyway? What? Language. Big time. We thought doing venture capital through an interpreter would be hectic and hard, and even if we hired some Chinese, which we had already, we did identify a couple, we felt it's just too much. So the language, very important. What else?
The court system or rule of law?
Rule of law is essential, because a contract, particularly in those days, China's changed quite a bit, but in those days, a contract really didn't mean much. If either of you didn't like it, you just tore it up, and that wasn't going to work very well. So rule of law, democracy, was important to us just because we knew it worked so well here. Not working so well right now, but but it did work well then, and it's going to work well again. Vote Republican. No, sorry. Let's see. Another reason we might have gone to India. Yeah, higher education there. They have the IIT, Institute of International Technology, and they take a test. Everybody takes a test when they get out of high school, and it's strictly the top, half of 1% or something like that of the application that they take. So that's a very good point. Truthfully, the education system in China is far better than that in India. And I think a big part of that is the Indians don't know how to collect taxes on an organized way, and there's a lot of corruption around Delhi. But there's no money in the bank in Delhi, in India, in the Indian government. Meanwhile, in Beijing, all the money's there. Everything is owned by the government, practically. They've now encouraged, thanks to Deng Xiaoping, they've encouraged entrepreneurship, and now it's not all government owned, but the government has a big pile of money to put, and they know enough, they're smart enough, put that money into education. So the education system in China is far better than that in India. And even in the smaller, in the grade schools, the teachers don't show up in India, they don't get paid, they're out in the villages, they're hard to get to, it's just a complicated thing. But on higher education, Institute of International Technology is a great, so that is another. There's one other thing that I should mention. I did touch on it. There are a lot of there were at that time, a lot of Indians that had come to Silicon Valley and already succeeded before the Chinese came. Now there's more Chinese probably here, I don't know. But the Indians did very well, and software was the future. And if you spoke English, you could do software a lot better, and it was more acceptable, and there was more exchange. It was easier to get into. So those are the reasons. And we went to India, and it worked very, very well. Today, I'm not so sure. I might go to, I might pick China, or I might pick another country, maybe Vietnam. But going to a foreign country is a big deal, but it's also exciting, it's fun, it's educational, and it makes the time go by fast. And it's gone by too fast here. I'm afraid I'm finished.
Can you do one more?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think of like Tim's kind of big moment was kind of the all-in bet on internet companies, and now kind of Adam, maybe Boost or Bitcoin is the thing. Did you have a similar aha moment, like in industry?
No, we were totally agnostic as to what the entrepreneur might do, but for one thing, and that was technology in the broadest sense. So we weren't going to back grocery stores or a shoe sales company or something like that. We wanted. Oh, I take that back. We backed in India a shirt. What? No, but we did back a clothing company. The best management we ever saw was one that they had their own design of clothes, and on the rack the concept, because in India at that time most of everybody had a suit tailor-made. So being on the rack was kind of a new idea, and selling a suit that's off the rack. And we backed this company, and they did pretty well. But then something went wrong, and we never made any money on it. But we got a couple of nice shirts. Okay, I think that's it, guys. Thank you very much. Great.